What's up everyone, Wave here. Today we're gonna find out which class you should actually play in Lost Ark. So this will be a reaction on Ryhkker. He makes a bunch of ARPG videos like Diablo specifically, and now he makes actual Lost Ark content. That's interesting. Let's get started.
This is Ryhkker with a class overview video for Lost Ark.
I'm gonna pause in between, of course.
To play. In this video, we'll go over what each class does
Damn,
and make some
Fox
recommendations to help steer you to the right class for you. For this video, I consulted with Lost Ark expert Percy from Max Roll, and you can find
Max Roll is a good
details
site
on this topic in the written class guide, which was a collaborative effort.
I think I used it for Diablo.
Lost Ark
I can remember correctly.
In the description below. Now, upon its Western release, Lost Ark will have
like, I'm more of a warrior type of guy. Like, I've always played World of Warcraft, always warrior, big dig, big damage. Like, who plays Mage? If you're pathetic, yes.
The warrior and the mage.
But we go in, we go melee.
Looks different and has different abilities and
we don't shy.
So when you create a character, you
From
start
combat,
by picking an archetype. But then each of those archetypes has advanced classes or subclasses, which are unlocked at level.
Wait, as you can see right here, the martial artist has 4, gunner has 4 as well, 2, and warrior 3. Okay.
10. And among Lost Ark players, it's really those subclasses or advanced classes that people refer to when they're talking about classes in the game. So that means in total, when you're picking what class to play, you're picking from one among 15 different classes, and more will release over time. So in this video, we're going to go over those 15 different choices, give an overview of each to help you understand the playstyle, and offer some recommendations based on strengths and weaknesses of the classes. So if you're already familiar with the classes and how they play and just want to go straight to the recommendations, you can follow the timestamp in the description below. Now before we dive in, we're just going to quickly mention that these classes are gender locked. That is, while you do have the ability to customize the appearance of your character, you cannot change the gender. And some classes,
I find that sucks. Why should be a correct gender lock in a fantasy game? That doesn't make any sense.
They really are their own class. We're also going to quickly explain identity skills and engravings. These are two important concepts to understand when we talk about classes. Every class has something called an identity skill that helps shape its identity. In most cases, the way this works is that you use normal attacks to build up your identity gauge that fills up, and then
basically like a rage meter
skill. These play a huge role in how a class feels to play. Then there are engravings. Engravings are special effects that can be found on certain items, and some engravings are class specific. Each class has two.
This kinda gives me a PoE vibe, but
class-specific engravings. And these engravings can completely change the playstyle of that class. In fact, it's not even really fair to say that you don't enjoy a class's playstyle until you've tried its 2 engravings. That's how significant they are. So, again, from an initial selection of 5 archetypes, we get 15 subclasses, each with 2 engravings, so 30 choices. You're really going into this with 30 different builds to pick
That's
from.
insane.
So, let's start now with the Assassin archetype. The Assassin's classes are the Deathblade and the Shadow Hunter, and both have high mobility and high damage. The
thing I also want to take is like the most popular class. Like, I don't get it why people play Rogue in like World of Warcraft all the time. Yeah, you do big damage, but he looks boring.
Deathblade has a lot of big area of effect skills,
every class looks exciting, man.
Has you filling up your identity gauge by using any of your skills to stack up to 3 levels of death orbs. You can then
like a combo meter,
enter a form known as Death Trance. This gives you access to a new skill called Burst that lets you consume your remaining death orbs to burst out of Death Trance while blasting enemies and knocking them down. The Deathblade's 2 class engravings are Burst, which makes you use your burst at max power regardless of how many death orbs you have left, and Remaining Energy, which gives you a power buff after using burst based on how many death orbs you have remaining. And both of these engravings are viable. Then the other assassin class...
So basically farm up the death orbs from trash mobs and then use that insane burst for the boss.
Is the Shadow Hunter, which has small area of effect skills compared to the Deathblade, but it has low cooldowns.
Okay, that looks like a mage, like a death mage.
Fill their identity gauge by using skills while in human form, and then when full, they can transform into a demon, which gives them access to an entirely new set of demon skills to use. So this is a transformation class. Then one of the class engravings, Demonic Impulse, allows you to enter demon form more often, and the other engraving, Perfect Suppression, will actually disable your demon form altogether and instead buff all your normal skills. And both engravings are viable. So that covers the assassin. We'll move on to the gunner now. This has 4 classes within it: the gunslinger, the deadeye, the artillerist, and the sharpshooter.
I never was a big fan of a gunner.
Mobility, single target damage, and area damage. And instead of an identity gauge,
Damn,
the
what was
gunslinger
that?
has the ability to swap between rifle, shotgun, and pistols. And each of these has their own set of skills. The sniper rifle is used for long range damage. The shotgun is used for up close damage. And the pistol skills tend to revolve around mobility and positioning. The gunslinger's class engravings are Peacemaker, which buffs all 3 weapons but is mainly used for rifle skills for maximum damage.
That thing
and then
looks
the
too slow for PvP.
engraving removes the shotgun from the gunslinger's arsenal altogether and instead adds more crit chance to the remaining skills. Of these 2, time to hunt is easier to play because you have fewer skills that you have to rotate through, so better for beginner players. Then the Deadeye class. This is the male version of the gunslinger. He also wields those 3 weapons, but the difference between the Deadeye and the gunslinger is that the gunslinger is better with the sniper rifle, and the Deadeye is better with the shotgun. Positioning is especially important for the Deadeye because you want to be up close and behind your target to deal maximum damage. The Deadeye's first class engraving is Enhanced Weapon, which makes him deal more damage via a higher crit rate, and the other is Pistolier, which restricts the Deadeye to only pistol skills.
Okay, not my thing,
the enhanced weapon engraving here, as Pistolier deals less damage.
The sniper look cool though.
The shotgun is his specialty, and you're taking away his shotgun. The next class, the Artillerist, sacrifices mobility for heavy guns and heavy armor. His identity gauge is split into 3 stages that fill up by dealing damage. With each additional stage,
can he place down turrets? That would be cool.
And the final stage lets you activate Barrage Mode, which basically turns you into a stationary turret with access to 4
just use some Jericho missiles
to bombard your enemies while protecting you with a shield. This class is easy to learn, but difficult to master. Its class engravings are Firepower Enhancement, which gives you more damage and more survivability, and Barrage, which resets the cooldowns on your barrage mode skills when you kill an enemy. However, since mobility is a big part of Lost Ark, you seldomly want to be just sitting around for a long period of time, so barrage
I don't know how
he
would do it in PvP.
Then lastly, the sharpshooter class uses a bow instead of guns. It has skills with low cooldowns and quick animations, and he's highly mobile. When his identity gauge is full, he can summon a hawk that comes with its own attack skills.
Imagine you get skins for
Death Strike
skills.
and Loyal Companion present the same playstyle here. Build up your hawk meter and unleash the hawk. That takes us to the Mage archetype, which has 2 classes, the Sorceress and the Bard, and they're quite different. The Sorceress deals good damage with lots of area of effect spells,
standard
but
stuff.
can be quite squishy.
Not big a fan.
She fills her identity gauge in order to empower her damage or to activate a special mobility skill. Her class engravings are Heightened Senses, which revolves around dealing a huge amount of burst damage in a...
Like, it's always the same thing with mages. Come on, why do you want to play this class? It's always the same. You just use your elemental abilities, use fire, ice and stuff at one place. Massive AoE burst. Yeah, I get it. Like,
window. With this engraving, the Sorceress has little mobility and needs to be very careful with her positioning. The other class engraving is Conscious Dissonance, which is based on dealing consistent damage
that's what I'm gonna say.
with little downtime and without having to rely on the identity gauge. This version has higher mobility because she can focus on using her identity gauge for that special mobility skill instead. Then the Bard is one of 2 support classes in Lost Ark. She lacks high single...
Like, if I play something intelligence related, like the stat, it should be a Bard, or someone who heals, someone who debuffs. These were classes I played. Like the Warrior, my secondary character was a Necro for debuffing stuff. That was cool, man.
Target damage skills, but her big area of effect skills are on par with other classes. When a Bard fills her identity gauge, she can play one of 2 songs: Serenade of Courage to give her party a nice attack buff, or Serenade of Salvation to provide heals. And when it comes to engravings, bards are more flexible than other classes, and they should change up their engravings based on the specific content that they're doing. So a lot more variety here. That takes us to the martial artist archetype. This is an
I'm like kind of in between of a martial artist and a warrior, so I'm thinking.
Agile archetype
What should
with
I pick?
incredible attack speed. Its classes include the Scrapper, the Solfist, the Striker, and the War Dancer. Now, the Scrapper is a pure melee class with no range skills at all, just Fists of Fury. She also has high mobility, and her identity gauge consists of 2 different energy types, Stamina and Shock. Spending Stamina restores
Looks
Shock
cool, but a bit
and
slow.
vice versa. So you'll always have some resource available to you to spend, and it's about balancing the use of these resources. Her 2 class engravings each focus on the skills of one of these 2 energy types, and both are viable. Then the Solfist is a well-rounded class, good mobility, good single target damage, and good area of effect damage. However, it is difficult to learn and
if you're into Dragon Ball, you know what to
Her
pick.
identity skill has 3 levels that
Like,
have
that's
to be
literally
manually increased. A higher level results in higher damage, greater attack speed, and shorter cooldowns.
But before we keep going, I want to remind you that you could leave a sub, please. And of course, you should subscribe to Ryhkker if you want to get good Lost Ark news. He does great content. Like, it's always top of the line, best quality for reviewing
At the
stuff
cost of
and guide
shortened
stuff.
durations of these identity buffs. However, the robust Spirit
You
class
can't go with
engraving
him.
lets you skip levels 1 and 2 and go straight
That's
to
up to me,
level
please.
3, and you get even more buffs. The other engraving, Energy Overflow, is considered weaker, resulting in more consistent, sustained damage, but less overall damage. Then the Striker is a high mobility class with small area of effect skills.
That's
For
more
his
like it.
identity, he generates elemental orbs by dealing damage, and he can then use special skills to consume those orbs to deal
That's
high
something I would
burst
play,
damage.
man.
His
That's good.
engravings include
That's cool.
Esoteric Flurry, which has you rotate through 3 different skills that spend elemental orbs, which results in a less burst-heavy playstyle. And then you have Death Blow, which leans into the burst damage and amps it up. Then lastly, the War Dancer also generates elemental orbs like the Striker, but consumes them with a different set of skills, though she is still a burst damage focused class. Her Esoteric Skill Enhancement engraving makes her special esoteric
That thing looks great.
deal more damage, while the First
I
Intention
think
engraving
her or the
gives
Striker.
a flat buff to all
I'm still
skills
thinking.
instead, at the cost of being unable to use any of those special esoteric skills. The War Dancer is a high mobility class with some of the lowest cooldowns and fastest animations in the game, and while she lacks area of effect skills, she makes up for it with high damage against single targets.
That's something
Then
good you could use in
lastly, we have
PvP.
the Warrior archetype, which has 3
Oh, yeah.
classes: the Berserker, the Gunlancer, and the Paladin. The
Let's go.
Berserker is a high burst damage class, lots of big area of effect skills, though he has
That's
long
more like
cooldowns
it.
and long skill animations.
That's the stuff
His
I wanna-
identity gauge fills up while hitting enemies.
Yeah,
and once
yeah.
full, it allows him to enter burst mode, in which he
I think
has
I'm gonna
increased
go
attack
straight up
and
with
movement
Berserker,
speed.
like-
The Berserker's 2 class engravings change how this
After
burst
just
mode
seeing
works.
that, I was instantly thinking,
Berserker's
yeah, I'm gonna
technique
pick him.
removes the exhaustion debuff that you would typically get at the end of burst mode, and gives you extra crit rate and crit damage when in burst mode. The Mayhem engraving, on the other hand, allows Berserkers to stay in burst mode for however long they want, and you can enter it whenever you want without having to worry about the identity gauge. And it also gains a huge damage reduction buff. Then the Paladin is the other support class in Lost Ark.
Wait, you
He
can
does
play
have a
a
decent
warrior
amount of
support?
area of effect damage skills, and he can use one of his 2 identity gauge skills to buff his own damage.
Damn.
The Paladin really shines when serving as a tanky support, by using his second identity skill, Holy Aura, to heal and give a damage buff to allies, particularly when combined with the Blessed Aura class engraving. Then lastly, there's the Gunlancer.
Yeah.
He has strong area of effect
don't know.
skills, though low mobility. His identity gauge fills up while dealing damage, and he consumes the gauge by activating
I'm not a big fan
shields
of
that
gun
protect
lens
himself or
stuff
his
or
team.
gunblade
The
stuff.
Combat Readiness engraving makes his normal skills deal more damage and results in the build with the greatest survivability in Lost Ark. Then the Solo Knight engraving
Like for full
focuses
tank or
on
what?
buffing his special Gunlancer skills, making this a high burst damage variant. Alright, now that we're done with the overview of all the classes, let's get more specific about recommendations. So first off, if you're looking for something beginner friendly, we got 5 classes to recommend.
Tommy.
The first pick is the Gunlancer. He is very
nah.
forgiving to play, since he's so tanky lots of shields. If you make a mistake in combat, you're not going to get punished that heavily for it. It's really rare to die from one-shots when you're playing a Gun Lancer. It's also inexpensive to build a Gun Lancer, because he can make use of engravings that other classes can't, or at least shouldn't, meaning they'll be less expensive for him to buy on the auction house.
Yeah, but
there'll be less demand
for the
for
looks,
them. However, if that playstyle doesn't interest you, then the Artillerist is easy to learn and forgiving to play with high survivability, though we do put this in a distinct second place to the Gun Lancer.
Please show me Berserker.
Then there's the Berserker's Mayhem build. Very simple to play. It's a 2-button build. Now we'll talk a bit more about that Mayhem engraving. It gives you a debuff to your health. Your health can never rise above 25% of its max. While that sounds scary, you get a 65% damage reduction.
But that's what it's all about. The Berserker going low HP, do big damage, fast, crit damage, crit rate. Yeah.
Buff. And this also means that potions are now super effective for you. If a potion heals you 25% of your max health, and you can't go above 25% of your max health, then a potion is always healing you for all of your health. So that means you're going to save a lot of gold with this build on buying potions. Then there's also a combat engraving. That's a non-class specific engraving that you can use that makes you deal more damage based on how much health you are missing. This is a natural synergy with this build. And it's another engraving you'll be able to pick up for cheap because no one else wants to run this, so the demand for the engraving is going to be low, so you can get it for cheap on the auction house. Then our final 2 beginner recommendations will be the 2 support classes, Bard and Paladin. These 2
Paladin also looks nice,
engravings. No other
I'm hesitating.
Berserker use defensive engravings because you're sacrificing damage. It's just not... It's not viable to
that was my Discord, sorry.
Unoptimized build.
So don't look.
So again, these will be cheaper to buy, so the build is cheaper to put together, and they'll make you stay alive more easily, so it also helps with beginners. The supports also have lots of shields and defensive capabilities, meant to help your party, but you benefit as well. Supports are also always needed in a party. So even if you're
I think I'm gonna go with Paladin.
maxed with your build and your gear, as long as you're hitting your skill timings on the buffs that the party wants, you're good. So that's the beginner recommendations. Now, what are our recommendations if you're coming from another MMO? You're asking, what's the best tank? What's the best support? What's the best DPS? Well, Lost Ark has no trinity. Any combination of classes can be viable as long as you have one support in the party. And one single support is what you want to aim for.
That's great.
More than one
and I'm going with the Palace support, and I'm always wanted
one support and then any other combination. That said, let's say you're a tank player and you really want to play a tank in Lost Ark. Well, there's no class that can just hold aggro while the rest of your party stands behind and rains damage effortlessly. It's just not a thing in Lost Ark. But the thing that comes the closest to that is the Gun Lancer. He has the most reliable taunt power. That said, it has a long cooldown and it only lasts a few seconds.
Just because of the looks, I don't like it.
It's used more as an interrupt when you see an enemy doing or about to do something dangerous. Still, the Gun Lancer is probably going to be the closest to a traditional MMO tank experience. If you want to play support because you're a support player, the best support depends on the composition, but in general, Bard tends to be preferred in groups because she adds more survivability. Lots of skills with shields, damage reduction, and a high amount of uptime on all of these.
As an alt,
the Paladin is certainly viable. He's just the more aggressive option. So he's best in compositions that are really looking for more damage buffs. Then, what if you're a PvP player? What's the best PvP class?
Well, show me this.
Giant disclaimer. Lost Ark gets balance changes very often, and these changes can change the meta. The current meta in PvP revolves around crowd control and your ability to resist it. As an influx of new players are going to enter the PvP scene, you're going to see a big difference between new players and experienced players. Some classes will be absolute noob stompers. They'll just completely destroy new players who don't understand how to counter these tactics. But then these same builds and classes will be ineffective against experienced players. So for instance, the Artillerist is very forgiving in early PvP. It will stomp noobs, but it will be easily outplayed by the Deathblade, for instance, and becomes one of the weaker PvP options at high levels of play. So at those high levels of play, the Deathblade, the Shadowhunter, the Gunslinger, these all have high mobility and they're gonna shine.
Yeah, they are like...
The Solfist is also very strong, but it relies on waiting for the right moment to strike. You crowd control an enemy, pop in, deal a lot of damage, and then pop out as soon as possible. Then the Gunlancer is also strong in PvP because he's so tanky. He can interrupt enemies, and your teammates will be happy to have you
interruption
on the team,
grabs like in video.
Well. However,
this is important stuff.
Enemies will tend to ignore you in favor of chasing the squishier targets. So it could be a frustrating play experience to go with Gunlancer. You're basically a tank that has no ability to pull aggro. Then, of course, the support classes, Bard and Paladin, invaluable in PvP. Sure, everyone wants to play the DPS, but the supports are really the stars, the core that holds the PvP team together. And that's
maybe
a video. So hopefully now you got a better
Bard.
idea of what class to go with, and I encourage you to sound off in the comments with what class you'll be starting with in Lost Ark. Also, do stay tuned for more Lost Ark videos, including a leveling guide to get you from 1 to 50 as soon as possible.
I'm not gonna watch that one experience
and be sure to check
blind,
out maxwell.gg for all the Lost Ark resources and written guides you could possibly need. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube.
Subscribe to Ryhkker and to me, of course. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna do first impressions video about Lost Ark after this one. And I see you next time. Wafer out.